I have 13 and a half distilling tips that are going to help you become a better distiller that I learnt from the professionals in America. How's it going, chasers? I hope you're having a kick-ass week. I'm Jesse, this is Still It, and I've just got back from America, and I was lucky enough to be able to spend a bunch of time with a bunch of very, very smart and very talented people related to the distilling space. And there's a bunch of content that's going to be coming out, you know, based on those experiences and the people I got to hang out with over the next 2-3 months. But there's also a bunch of little hints and tips that I learnt along the way that are never going to make it into, you know, maybe their own specific video. So I thought, why not just cram all of them into one tips and tricks video? The first place I visited was Ironroot Republic, run by the Licorice family in Denison, Texas. And I have to say, guys, if you're anywhere in the area and you care about any of this stuff at all, just go to Ironroot Republic, hang out in the tasting room, try a few different things. Definitely buy a bottle. In fact, I brought 2 bottles home from Ironroot, which are now in my bar inside. But anyway, they're insanely knowledgeable about distilling, and hanging out with them for a few days, some things are going to rub off on you. So here's some tips from the crew at Ironroot. The first tip has to do with cutting from heads to hearts during a run, and it is nothing specifically new to me, but it is a very different set of descriptors than I've ever heard used before. They look for 2 things near the end of heads before switching over to hearts, and the first is baby spew. When they said this, I had no idea what they were talking about until they described further, not throw up sickness, but like a small infant spilly milk throw up, if that makes sense. They also described it as being similar to rubber tires. I didn't understand that at all until I finally thought of changing a bike tire. The rubber inner tube inside the, you know, sealed inside the bike tire with all that stench that can't go anywhere, that smell. That's similar to sweet baby sick. They look for that, and when that finally fades away, the next thing that's going to pop up is astringency and fresh cardboard. Not like wet cardboard, wet dog that comes in the tails, fresh cardboard. And when those finally die away, it's time to cut to hearts. Keep in mind, guys, this is specifically when talking about cutting whiskey, and more specifically talking about cutting corn whiskey. But in saying that, I think there's something that holds true there for probably most things. So I'm going to keep this in mind next time I distill anything. Next tip from Ironroot. The last time I was there, we talked a bunch about specialty corn, and while I haven't been able to use it here in New Zealand, which sucks, if anyone can help me get hold of Bloody Butcher, Jimmy Red, Blue Corn, any of those things, please let me know. Back then, they were using relatively small amounts of specialty corn, maybe 5%, both for flavor reasons and exploratory reasons, but also just for logistics and economical reasons. Since then, they've pushed that way up to around about 30%. And that's where they think the payoff in both flavor and, you know, economically, the amount of money you're spending on specialty corn kicks in. So if you are thinking of playing with specialty corn, 30% is probably not a bad place to start. I need to jump in here real quick and say a huge thank you to the sponsor of today's show, Into the AM. They make these awesome shirts, like this absolutely freaking dope jellyfish shirt, which glows in the dark, which is pretty dope. We've also got a collaboration shirt between Chase the Craft and Into the AM, which is freaking awesome. There's a code in the description down below that'll get you 10% off everything from Into the AM, which is freaking cool. If that's not enough for you, let me say that these are insanely comfortable. The most comfortable shirts I have. And if you've been watching for a while, you would have seen all of this. What you probably haven't seen is the new stuff that's on their website right now. If you go to their website and click on new on the top left-hand side, you get a whole host of new art coming out on shirts, which is absolutely dope. I am particularly partial to the Cosmic Owl. I think that's pretty freaking awesome. Anyway, thank you Into the AM for sponsoring this episode. While still talking about percentages, we're going to move away from grist percent over to ABV percent of the wash that you're fermenting. That was a crappy segue. I apologize, but I talked to them at length about their recipes, the numbers they aim for, and they have settled on trying to aim for around about 11% in the wash. Once again, logistically, there's issues in terms of, going a whole lot higher when you're just using grain. But funnily enough, that wasn't really the reason they landed on it. It seemed like 11% was where they found they could push the percentage up to in terms of just getting higher yield out of the amount of time they have, versus not overstressing their yeast, not doing anything weird in fermentation. 11% was the number that they've hit that they think dials in the best of everything for their distillery overall. Obviously, they are very good at looking after their yeast, making sure the fermentation is happy, all of those things. So maybe it makes sense for those of us with a little bit less experience than them to aim a little bit lower to start with. But I am going to try pushing my percentages up a smidge and see if I can do so without any negative impacts. Let's keep it with fermentation for a while and talk about yeast. I've been singing the praises of co-pitching yeast for a while now, and that is basically pitching two different yeasts that are going to give you two different things that you want. Maybe one is a flavor bomb in terms of the esters you like, and the other one cleans it up. Two different flavor profiles brought back together, so on and so forth. And I think actually I've told you lies in the past. I think that I said Ironroot specifically use a English ale yeast and a M1 yeast together. That is incorrect. They've never done that. I think I mixed them up with Balcones Distillery in Texas. Anyway, I talked to them about this issue, and they said that they've tried it in the past and they like the results, but why not just ferment the two yeasts separately, maturate them separately, and then blend them back together later on so you can hit the exact ratios you want with the exact percentages you want. Makes a whole lot of sense, doesn't it? I guess the only downside for us as home distillers is that takes a lot more foresight and planning, and also probably a little bit more volume to be able to maturate in meaningful volumes over enough time to then be able to blend it. But I think it's a pretty good tip. No segue for this one. This one's totally out of left field. When you proof a spirit down to a proof that you want to drink it at, and you get that proofing shock. Things just go weird. Strange things come out of solution. They don't go back into solution overly quickly. The spirit can taste suddenly a whole lot fiery than it did at a higher proof. It can taste smokier. All these weird flavors can come out that you've just never tasted in the spirit before. And it might take a day, 2 days, a week to go back to normal. Here's a strange tip for that. Try using a carbonation stone in the spirit. Carbonation stone, O2 wand, what do the fish tank guys call them? They're carb stones, right? I don't know. You know what I mean though, right? One of those little stones that you can push air through and it turns into little tiny micro bubbles. They're literally putting that into the spirit, running it as they're putting the liquid in, and then turning it off afterwards. I don't know what the mechanics are here at work, and I've yet to try this. But if they say it works, I tend to think that it's probably true. I don't know if they know the mechanics either. But the idea is, I guess, that it just mixes the water and the spirit quicker? I don't know. But they're claiming that the bottle shock, the proofing shock, whatever you want to call it, goes away much, much quicker. It's not that they're using this, to proof bottles down for production bottling. They're using this as a trick to be able to taste and sample a proofed product quicker rather than having to wait for ages. That's genius. I love it. I need to try this. And the last tip from Ironroot Republic has to do with how fine to grind your corn. Now, as home distillers, if we are trying to strain it out at any point in time, you can disregard this. So if you are fermenting on grain but distilling off grain, if you are fermenting off grain, anything like that, disregard this because you need a little bit of chunk to the corn to be able to actually strain it. But if you're not, cracking or grinding to a finer consistency is going to help with your efficiency in the mash. Just makes sense, right? There's more surface area. And they suggested purely for efficiency purposes going down to 1 or 2 64ths of an inch. I held the stuff in my hand and I felt it. So I have a rough idea, but it means nothing to me. That's this in metric. The problem is at that size, it tends to go kind of goopy and cementy. Turns almost into a paste, and it is really hard to work with, especially if you're pumping it. Interestingly enough, if you're pumping corn, it tends to pump best at around 5 to 6 64ths of a millimeter. Larger than that, and there's big chunky bits that are hard to deal with. Smaller than that, and it starts to go to the goopy stuff more and more. But, like we established earlier on, that is not entirely ideal for efficiency. They've established that the best of both worlds is right around 3/64ths of an inch. There's some pretty specific information. I hope that helps someone out there. From Denison, Texas, I headed down to Austin, Texas, where I got to attend the Bastards Ball, which it was awesome. Absolutely amazing, guys. I got to meet so many freaking cool people. A bunch of you, a bunch of industry people, just a bunch of like-minded people all coming together for the same reason, their love of whiskey, which was absolutely awesome. But I also got to talk to Kyle from the Crowded Barrel Distillery, and he showed me this map from Middleton. And sometimes in this hobby, in this profession, whatever you want to call it, you see something and think, why have I never seen this before? This seems like something I should have seen. I hadn't. So I'm putting this on the list for two reasons. One is it's a reminder that you're never going to know everything, and there's a bunch of super freaking obvious stuff that you probably haven't seen before. And two, because this is a really cool visual demonstration of at least one distillery's low wines, heads, and tails map for triple distillation. Triple distillation is something that I've played with almost not at all. And in some ways it's tricky for me because really to be able to do this, you need to make the same thing over and over again. That's not good YouTube. So I'm not sure how to go about this, but it's definitely something I want to try. So huge thanks to Kyle for showing me this and kind of blowing my mind. Kyle was actually able to attend the next thing that we did as well. We got to hang out together again at Andalusia Whiskey Company, and I mean, the guys at Andalusia are just amazing. Thank you, Moose. Thank you, Ty, for welcoming us, for making the first distillery takeover event, in my mind, an absolute success. If you happen to be there, drop a comment in the comment section down below. Let us know how you think it went. I'm interested to hear your thoughts. I'll be sending out probably a questionnaire or something for you guys to fill out as well. But I did manage to learn a couple of different things from Andalusia, from Ty and Moose. Number one is, how do I put this? The amount of heavy lifting, the amount of change that is brought around by the use of significant amounts of time and a real barrel. It's just unlike almost anything I've been able to recreate at home. I've got 2, maybe 3 spirits that are starting to show signs of this over 5 years. And that's the time frame they work on, which is interesting. But I feel like the differences were even greater with their products compared to mine. Them using staves, they are using barrels. I have been up until this point using exclusively staves. And the reason I know this is that they were kind enough to pour samples of their product as White Dog, and actually all of the cuts broken up as well. But also 1 day in a barrel, I think it was 6 months, a year, 2 years, and 5 years. And we were able to taste through that lineup over time to see how the spirit changed and morphed. The change that they were getting is definitely a lot more dramatic than what I've been seeing in my spirits, but also they were cutting a whole lot dirtier than I would have imagined based on the kinds of spirits that they're making. So I guess that's really 2 tips here, or tip part, or maybe a tip and a 0.5 of a tip. I don't know. But the first one is just the difference between barrels and staves from what I've been experiencing more and more and more, especially over time. And 2, how freaking dirty you can cut when you plan on aging over time. And I can't really express to you exactly what that was like, because any descriptor I give you is always relevant to some other experience you've had, or it isn't going to do it justice. So I guess maybe, to sum this up, the tip should really be find a distillery that you respect in terms of the products they're making, and see if you can find a way to be able to taste their White Dog. Not their white whiskey or the moonshine that they release, the White Dog that goes into the barrels. If you go to Andalusia, which I highly recommend you do because it's an awesome place, awesome people, awesome spirits, and a great location. If you go there, maybe have a talk to Ty or to Moose and, buy a bottle of spirits off them and then see if they'll let you taste some White Dog. Can't guarantee anything, but it's worth a shot, right? I have another slightly Yoda-like tip from Andalusia. They also, as well as serving us that vertical tasting over time, they also served us a bunch of different spirits that had problems with them. Sounds weird, I know, but we weren't there to drink delicious things, we were there to learn stuff. And often, trying things that aren't great in a known way is an excellent way to improve your craft, no matter what you're into. One of the things they served us tasted straight up like green chili. I've had things that are slightly bell peppery before. I've had things that are slightly grassy before. This tasted like green chili. Not the dish, New Mexico green chili. That's what it tasted like to me. The fact that a spirit could even taste like that whiskey could taste like green chili, was awesome. But that wasn't the tip that I want to give you. The tip that I want to give you is the way that they went about figuring out what happened. They knew that they had a whole lot of barrels that had been treated pretty much in the same way. Same recipe in, same cuts, same operation on the still, same yeast, same grist, so on and so forth. They had a whole bunch of barrels that had all been in the same place, relatively the same age. The one thing that was the variable between them was probably going to be the barrel. And that gave them enough of a lead to do a bit of research and figure out that there was a bacterial contamination in the wood, and that was likely the source of this strange flavor. Freaking crazy, right? And the only way that you would have got to that realization, to be able to find that knowledge, to put two and two together, is to follow things through logically. And the reason I say it's Yoda-like is how the hell do you apply that to what you're doing? I've got no answer for you there. I just kind of wanted to throw it out as a little bit of inspiration in terms of how you can use logic and the process of elimination to get an answer that's both interesting and educational. After Texas, I headed over to North Carolina to hang out with the crew at Clawhammer Supply. Let me tell you guys, it is freaking awesome to finally meet internet friends in person and realize they're even cooler than you thought they were. Had a blast hanging out with them, but I don't have any tips from them today specifically because, well, a lot of what I think I'm going to learn from those interactions are yet to come. I'm just going to let that hang there and tease you a little bit in terms of what's to come. But from North Carolina, I went over to Oregon and I got to hang out with Ben from Bad Motivated Barrels. I don't think at this point in time he needs any introduction. But if he does, he's the dude that makes these little barrels, which are absolutely freaking awesome. I got to hang out with Ben for 2 or 3 days. Lots of work, lots of just hanging out and getting to know the guy. Once again, another awesome person that I met online, and it was an absolute pleasure to get to know him. So he took a bunch of wood that was as similar as humanly possible, or woodly possible, and created a matrix of toast temperature and toast time. And he ended up with, I don't know, like 20 odd jars, something like that. And we tasted through it, and honestly, we were supposed to make a video and didn't because we just didn't have time. But the thing that I want to point out here is that this is another, how do I put it? It's another one of those things that you just, in my opinion, can't read about. I'm sure if you've been doing this for any length of time, you have seen this graph in terms of toast temperature and flavor. And the awesome and yet slightly disappointing part about the matrix that he did when we tasted it was that that graph turns out to be relatively accurate in my experience with that one test. But the flip side of that is that it was, how do I put it? It's kind of like going to the Grand Canyon. You've seen the pictures, you've seen the postcards, you've read about it. You turn up and it is exactly what everyone tried to describe to you, but couldn't quite do. It's just different experiencing it in person. So my tip would be, maybe don't go to that extreme. Maybe don't do 20 odd jars, but try it. Try toasting, wood at 5 or 6 different temperatures, sticking it into exactly the same spirit and letting it sit for a while so you can personally experience the difference in flavor. And I need to do this. I need to do this here in New Zealand so I have it as a reference going forward. We may have tasted it with a few drinks behind us as well. So I'd like to recreate it here in New Zealand and be able to refer to it over a long period of time so I can really digest the outcome. Ben also introduced me to Kaylin from Thinking Tree Distillery. I'm feeling like a horrible person. I can't remember the exact name of the business now. I'll put it on screen here. Oh, by the way, guys, there'll be links to all of these distilleries and companies and stuff down in the description below, so check those out. But Thinking Tree is in Eugene, Oregon, and the thing that I learned from Kaylin is that research is great. It's awesome. The internet is a wonderful place to find information. Sure, that's a great thing. And we live in a time where being able to find that information is just so much more accessible than it used to be. But at the end of the day, you're not going to learn everything from being able to do that, and you just need to freaking try something. You just need to do it. That's something that I am traditionally kind of bad at, especially in a business setting. He is doing that at Thinking Tree. He's doing some, just going out there and trying stuff and doing it. And he's got some kick-ass rum samples that I was able to sample. Sorry, Kaylin, I hope that that's not a secret, because I know it's not actually released yet. And also, I think it was some wild fermented like pear cider. So I guess that's what, perry that's been distilled. It was absolutely awesome. And both of those things were a direct result of the fact that he just got after it and did something without stressing too much about the theory. I know this is in direct contradiction to some of the things that I said earlier, but depending on the person you are and depending on the way you come to this hobby, that might be a tip that you need to hear. Someone like me needs to hear that every now and again. So I appreciate it. Thanks, Kaylin. That was really cool to be able to try stuff. I have 2 tips left for you. One is a specific tip about a specific product from a specific distillery, and the second one is a much more overall technical tip. But before we do that, I need to say huge thank you to the Patreons. Thank you so much, Patreons, for being the day in, day out support for this channel. I really can't thank you enough. I know before I went away, there was a couple of people saying that their names had dropped off the list or never made it onto the list. I've done it manually this time, and I hope it's fixed it. So let me know if you're still missing, all right? So let's get stuck into the specific one. This is from Kyle from Fireside Distilling in Oregon as well. And he has been making, I guess, more like kind of liqueur type things for a while. And one of his main products is limoncello. I love the stuff. I've only ever made it twice, once as a test and once on the channel. Absolutely loved it. But one of the things that you hear people say all the time in home distilling is the pith. Don't get the white pith. The pith is bitter. Like, don't get that stuff. It's horrible, so on and so forth. His take on the topic was basically, screw that. Don't stress about it so much. A little bit of bitterness is actually a good thing in spirits like this. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't tried his product, but I think it's an excellent tip, both as a specific tip because, yeah, a little bit of bitterness, especially in products like that, helps to balance it. It almost seasons it. It adds an extra X factor into the product rather than it just being lemon and sugar and alcohol. Do you know what I mean? It adds another dimension. So yeah, I'm totally on board with it. And I think that's kind of an interesting illustration into how we as a hobby, and I guarantee you I'm guilty of this, but we get sort of fixated on certain things that might even be a good idea in some ways, but it turns out to be bad advice as an overall. All right, the last tip, and this doesn't come from anyone in particular because it came from a bunch of different people. I talked to, at least 6 different people about this throughout the course of the trip, so I can't attribute it to anyone specific. And that is the way you treat running the still out after making your hearts cut and during stripping runs. And for both of these, I realized that compared to the commercial people, I am running nowhere near long enough. I generally go to 15%, definitely, normally down to 10% coming off the spout I'm talking about, and I'll cut it right around there somewhere. Almost unanimously, everyone's saying they'll get down to 2% coming off the spout. Yeah, like maybe 1%. It makes sense in a production environment because you're trying to eke out every little bit of product as you can. But the flip side of that is you're also paying for large amounts of energy to do it, right? And still, they say it works out economically to do so. The other part of this is also that, especially when you're making something like whiskey, you're actually bringing the proof overall of what goes into the still down, and that is kind of a good thing. I've often started distillation of a whiskey and it'll start coming off the spout like at 90%, you know, and then by the time I've made cuts, it's still at 86, 87%. Technically, legally, that's not whiskey. So they have that going for them as well, but it's also going to change the flavor of the final product. Subtly, but it will change it. So that is something I need to try as well. And at the end of the day, if we can be a little bit more economical about, you know, collecting more product, why not? All right, team, so there you have it. A whole bunch of different tips and tricks from the professionals in America. I know some of them are more conceptual rather than technical or specific to a certain thing. But in a hobby like this, sometimes it's just going to go that way. I can't give you specific answers. No one can give you specific answers because chances are you're probably making something that has never been made quite the same way anywhere else, ever. It's kind of freaking cool. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, make sure you do all the YouTube things. Give it a thumbs up. Drop a comment in the comment section down below. And I'll catch you next time, guys. You know what I'm doing next time? I'm making bourbon without a mash and no sugar.